I just did a quick check and apparently I've played the Caro-Kann opening for the first time about 8 years ago. And considering the fact that this is pretty much the only thing I play, and I also wrote a book on it, this easily puts me above the 2000 hours mark of study, which first of all means that I have no life, but second of all, I know a thing or two about this opening. And I'm happy to share my knowledge with you because today we're gonna be starting a new Caro-Kann speedrun. So I prepared 3 rapid games. Let's not waste any more time and dive right into the action. Welcome back, dear chess improvers. Opponent plays e4 and gonna be going for a Caro-Kann. So against King's Pawn, we can do the Caro-Kann. Against anything else, so e4, the Caro-Raccoon, and d4, c4, whatever, knight f3, goofy stuff. You can play the Black London. So I will be doing a series for that as well. Knight f3, gonna be playing the move d5, and opponent will have a few choices. So depending on what he plays, he has, let's say, 3 main continuations. Those are going to be the most common 3 type of positions that you can get in general and work with pretty much the same key ideas, which is why the Caro is such a beginner-friendly opening. So he can defend the pawn, he can advance, or play the capture, which is exchange variation. So against the exchange variation, Black's play is pretty simple because you can only remember where the pieces belong. So the knights are going on natural squares. You want to get the light square bishop outside the pawn chain, ideally on g4, f5. If g4 is not available, you can also get it on f5. And then you want to play the move e6. So play the move e6, preparing to develop the dark square bishop. I generally recommend only 1 square, so to e7, and finally we can castle. Of course, while you remember these ideas, it's important to keep them in the back of your mind and watch out for the moves of your opponent, because a lot of the times you may have to deviate and punish him for some type of mistake, or maybe play a defensive move. But for now though, he just seems to be chilling and developing. We're gonna do the same. e6 preparing bishop e7 and then castle. Wouldn't be shocked to see, I was about to say bishop g5 pin, but this one as well. The problem with the move bishop b5 is, as you can see, my opponent moved the bishop already once and he's moving it again. So moving the same piece multiple times without having finished development. Common beginner mistake in the opening. We're just gonna go bishop e7. Carry on with our business. I favor bishop e7 in general. Okay, my opponent just took. I will have to recapture. I'm happy to see this trade. Also, in general, bishops are slightly better pieces than the knights. So you can think of the bishop being worth 3 points and a quarter, and the knight only 3. Okay, we have a very fast game. I'm sorry, you'll have to keep up with the explanation. Yeah, I was about to say I favor bishop e7 because in low elo, most people only tend to develop their bishops to pin the knights with the idea to give them up. So if you look at it with a computer, let's say you try to do an analysis or look for optimal theory, bishop d6, it's a bit more active. But the problem is that it can be quite tricky to deal with this pin. So my simplified approach for newer players is just exchange variation. Always put the dark square bishop on e7. You're going to be doing just fine. You're not going to have to worry about this pin because you can easily move the queen without having to worry about capturing with a pawn and getting double pawns next to your king, which can be a pretty weakening move. Now we have already the first big interesting moment of the game because my opponent played queen d3. So you'll have to pause for a bit and think about potentially what is the idea behind our opponent's last move. Not spoiler, but hint. It's kind of connected to the concept of pinning that I've mentioned a second ago. We don't have to worry about the pin. So he just moved the queen with the idea to sidestep from this diagonal because he wants to centralize the knight. So he moved the queen. This is a big threat, and then our bishop is kind of a bit loosey-goosey. Bishop is struggling to find a job. It's getting replaced by the AI, so I'm just gonna start with takes. First moment, I see he unpins, he wants 95. Alright, we're gonna play accordingly. We're gonna give it up. Yes, it's a bit of a negative trade. Bishops are slightly better than knights, but it's totally justified here because white already, if you remember, has taken on c6. So, situation on the board, minor pieces, we both have knights and bishops. Central situation, we both have one-on-one. So position relatively balanced. Now, what you need to understand about the exchange variation is that all the focus is here. Never on the white king, just never, because this is where our play is. We have an open file. I'm gonna start with h6, getting rid of white's piece from our half of the board. He could slide it back or he could take. By the nature of this player, he doesn't seem afraid to give up bishops for knights. That looks like his parents didn't teach him that. I don't know. It's just maybe not a concept yet. Or he just likes knights. Knights are tricky in blitz. They can fork. True, but in general, in most of the endgames, the bishop will be able to outperform the knight simply because it's a long-range piece and it can switch between the sides much easier. Now, my opponent played b3. Reasonable move. He fails to spot the fact that I was attacking his pawn, but I'm not gonna go punish him. I'm gonna give him time to recover. So I'm just gonna develop my queen. I wanna let him protect the pawn so we can get more of like an interesting game. So I can show you how to typically break on the queen side. The whole idea is to go for c5 push. So I'm preparing c5 push and we're gonna have pressure on the queen side. Rook e1. So opponent still fails to realize that. I'm gonna put this rook on b8. I'm giving him one more chance. Come on, opponent. Do something. Rook d1. There's a pawn that's... There is no bait. It's a free pawn. I'm telling you. It's not like trying to bait Santa Claus with milk and cookies. That's genuinely a free pawn. Okay, he listened. Queen to d3. And now you want to be a bit careful as black. The only danger that there could be is to allow a blockade, which would stop our pawn break. It wouldn't necessarily be a disaster as the bishop has potential to eliminate the knight, but you do want to manage to break. So c5. And remember, all the action, exchange variation, everything is happening on that side of the board. You can literally put a piece of paper on this side. Just put a piece of paper, ignore it. Stay with it like that on your screen. It's gonna be enough to win most of your games if you focus where you must. Why? Because there is no black pawn on the b file, and we're also about to open up the c file. So we're focusing on open files. Okay, knight b5, targeting my queen. There could be some complications with c4 and try to make the argument that his knight is gonna be close to trapped, but we don't have to really like dive super deep into those. I'm just gonna move the queen somewhere it's attacking the knight while keeping my pawn protected. So I think the most impactful square is b6, not d7. These are the squares that achieve those goals. Because it's also pressuring d4. So this is like the most multi-purpose move that there is. So if possible, it's good to multitask in chess when it comes down to making active threats. The problem is when you multitask with defense, because then your piece becomes overloaded and opponent has usually multiple ways to use tactic of removing the defender. Okay, a4. Not a threat, just reinforcing the knight. Technically, this is still like a free pawn, which we're going to ignore because we are very clever and we're going to play an instructive game on the queen side. We already, anyways, we have a piece of paper on this side of the board. This is invisible. We're not looking at it. We are just winning over there. That's our mini chess game. It's like, okay, I haven't really played Go. I was just looking into it, but apparently Go is a much more complex game than chess. And in order to start playing Go, the actual game, they recommend you to use a mini board at the beginning and then to upgrade to the bigger board in Go. It's like we're doing a bit of a mini board here in chess as well, in the exchange variation of the Caro-Kann. We have our little queen side and we try to break through here. So, yeah. Let's see what my opponent's gonna do. He plays c3. He plays c3 and okay, he's playing a reinforcing move, but I think it's time to do simple concept. Try to get rid of an opponent piece that's chilling in our half of the board. That's the knight. Therefore, the move is very simple. We play a6. The knight pretty much has to go back. And remember, let's make it the rule this way. You play with a piece of paper on that side of the board until you win a pawn on the queen side. Once you win a pawn on the queen side, then you can remove it and focus again on the whole board. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. That's not an actual tip that you should be using, but I feel like a good way to emphasize the importance on focusing on the queen side in this variation. Because for a lot of the new chess players is that they're just obsessed with mating. I don't get it. How some people just want to checkmate. I get it. That's why we played the Jubava London as white. But with the black pieces, you have to... How to put it? You have to be a bit more like sneaky. You cannot show your intentions so clearly. You still want to win. You cannot go full speed like that at your opponent because he's got the extra tempo. So gotta respect that. Okay, so knight back. I could technically take twice on d4, but this is the main area of expertise. So I think I'm gonna stick with queen b3. Let's go for it. Attacking pawn. Up an extra pawn and things are looking quite promising. If rook b1, that drops the knight, so perhaps only the other rook can go to b1, but then there's a pawn on a4. Oh, rook e3. So opponent's putting a lot of pieces on the third rank. That seems to be his hobby. Okay. That's a free pawn. It's in this side of the board, so you get it. It's a free pawn. We're going to be taking it. Now, let's see. So focus here. We're up 2 pawns. Once there will be no more pieces on that side, then we can go back to normal. And I have a queen move. So queen b3, queen b5. Now when you're up, it's a conversion game. We prioritize the trades. So I'm going to go queen b5, offering him queen trade. If he wants to do it, fine. He goes rook g3. Okay, it's a move that he can play. We're going to take the queen trade. We're playing the conversion game. And now finally time to open up the rook path. And after knight takes on d4, pause the video and look for the last finesse of the game. Pause it. I'll have to blitz it out because not a lot of time left on the clock, but rook c3 is a nice little tactic because we're going to catch opponent on a skewer. So I'm pretty sure we're actually winning a piece because he's going to get back ranked, but no, I'm actually just miscalculating. He can go back and I'm going to have to play rook endgame with 2 extra pawns. This is just a classy way to just win another pawn though, not to overcomplicate things. But remember, focused here, made everything disappear like hocus pocus. Win the queen side, win the game. Just genuinely ignore this side of the board in the exchange variation. The only thing that you need to do in exchange variation is to make sure your king is safe. So as long as you don't get mated, you're probably doing pretty well just by focusing on the queen side. So gonna use most basic tactic, back rank my opponent, and we do get the win. All right, pretty simple game. So just Caro-Kann, you see the exchange. Remember, key development. This is what the key development looks like. Knights on natural squares. Get the bishop, the light square bishop outside the pawn chain. Play e6, play bishop e7, castle shot, and then I'm not even gonna say it. I'm just gonna be pointing towards it, okay? Focus there. There it is. Where is it? There it is. So I think with that we can move on to the following game. Let me know in the comments that you made it this far into the video by typing Capybara Caro, and make sure to also fist fight the like button, because in the next game I'm gonna be showing you how to deal with the advanced variation, or if you don't do that, I might not, and you don't wanna risk it, I guess. Welcome back everybody. Long time no Caro-Kann speedrun. We're gonna be resetting at 1000 elo. So against the king's pawn, we're gonna be playing Caro-Kann. Very important right from the beginning. I want you to clearly understand that only if they move king's pawn, which luckily for you they do most of the times, you can Caro-Kann. Against anything else, we're gonna play some Slav setup. That's gonna be like a reversed London with the white pieces. I'm gonna show you in a separate video. But for now, yeah, we're just gonna be Caro-Kanning. So still following the opening from the How to Chess series, in case you guys had a look on that one. But the difference is I'm gonna be going for the best moves. I'm not gonna sugarcoat my opponents anymore. And I'm also playing 10 minutes with no increment, which, yeah, I allow you to play once you crossed 1000 elo. You can start experimenting with it. If you're below 1000 elo, definitely go for the longer one, 15 minutes and 10 seconds increment. And okay, Caro-Kann, first crossroads, he can take, defend the pawn that I'm just attacking, or he can push. Now, on the How to Chess series, I'm focusing on bishop f5 and trying to play without theory. But here, I'm gonna go for the ruthless approach. I'm gonna go for c5. Botvinnik-Karl's variation, we are hitting the pawn chain at its base. Important. I'm not hitting the pawn chain on top. That would be quite weakening, and my opponent can easily defend it. But you wanna get used to this habit. When you have a pawn chain, you wanna hit it at its base. Now, base of the pawn chain has moved to b2. But if I take, the base of the pawn chain will be on d4. The pawns will be disconnected. I'm not gonna rush with takes, because that's gonna give him a bit of an easier time developing the knight. I'm gonna start with this move first, not being afraid of DC because I can take. And I'm not afraid of him taking the pawn in general, because after knight c6, the games will usually go knight f3. First, you do the bishop in, and then you're gonna be winning back the pawn quite easily, normally after e6, bishop c5. And knight e7 castle with easy play. Now, the key idea is after knight f3, I'm not gonna play e6, that would be planting the bishop for no reason. That would just transpose to standard French defense. But I want to get the bishop out and only then play e6. So you can get the bishop out, you can start with cd. I normally prefer to start with cd here just to fix the weakness on d4. Common mistake they take with the knight sometimes. Forgetting about the drawback of the move, which is we can take on e5. So he took, I'm gonna get the bishop in. I'm not blunting the bishop. That is the most terrible thing that you can do as a Caro-Kann beginner. The nice thing about Caro-Kann is that you get to develop your bishop outside the pawn chain. And then you play e6. All right. So important, what you need to understand as a win condition against advanced variation. You see pawn on e5, it makes it an advanced variation. Is that d4 is the most vulnerable point in white's camp. It's a pawn that cannot be protected by other pawns. And when it comes to developing, this is important in the Caro-Kann. You need to try to visualize what you do with both pieces before doing it. It's like doing pen management while you're cooking chicken breast. I always make this mistake of throwing it randomly. Even though there is enough space, I always end up with too much chicken breast and no space because I place it like a moron. So you want to see, okay, where is the knight going and then where is the bishop? Because if you do bishop, then the knight has no square. Bishop can capture. So you want to get the knight on f5, getting in a bit of a relationship with this pawn on d4. And then the bishop goes to e7 and we castle. So this is how you easily get developed when you're having a bit of a cramped position, a bit less space. Opponent goes knight b3. So one of the most important catalysts will be to watch out for his frets. The idea behind his last move. So far, since he played quite passively, I didn't mention, but already first sign of aggressiveness, knight c5, attacking the pawn. What should we do? Well, we have simple rule of thumb in general. When a piece of our opponent is entering our camp, we try to get rid of it immediately. I could do the move b6, but the problem with b6 is that it's softening my knight, so I would have to be afraid of potential pins. So fine, we're just gonna get rid of the knight on c5. Also, common motif in the advanced variation in Caro-Kann, whenever enemy knight gets to c5, it's usually best move to just take it. Sure, we're making a bit of a negative trade. Bishops are stronger pieces than knights, in general, just very slightly. But suddenly, the pawn on e5 has become weaker after dc. So, problem for my opponent is that he has, let's say, extra space. The pawns are quite far advanced, but you also need to be sustainable. So, already black has a pretty good move. So, please feel free to pause the video and think about what should we do. Maybe we can just castle. Or maybe we can try to take advantage of our opponent's mistake. The idea is e5 is defended only once. We're going to use one of the most standard tactics in chess, removing the defender. Take the knight, pick up 3 pawn. I could have castled and got a fine position, but then he would have had time to save the pawn. So no, I just take, put the pawn in the pocket, and then run away with it. I'm just going to castle. And already move 13, the game dramatically changes because we're having a type of possession where we just need to play conversion game. Black has extra material. So as long as you have extra material, that can mean one pawn, two pawns, an extra queen. Maybe I'm exaggerating with an extra queen. Let's say an extra piece. You just have to start trading all the pieces. I see a queen on b3. I'm just gonna go trade. Knight d4 is interesting, double attack, but that invites a check. So you just play trade. I trade knight for bishop, positive trade for us. And I'm gonna finish development with castle. Not anymore. That's a bit of a mistake. Creating himself doubled isolated pawns for no reason when queen could have captured, but he's banking on this idea that the queen targets the pawn. We have a few ways to defend. It's true I could also ignore and then try to go for a counterattack, but let's see if you guys can find the best way to defend the pawn. I'll give you a hint. You have to take into account what his potential reply can be. Because rook b8 can be a nice move, but bishop f4, you have to watch out for it. And he gets to do the same. Removes the defender of the pawn. So because bishop f4 is annoying, I'm thinking one of these two moves. I think they should be equally good. I'm gonna do queen c7 just because it's stopping the bishop from an active possession. If he checks me, I can use the queen to block. And then we castle. So as I was mentioning, very important to understand, whenever you've got extra material, you gotta play it simple. You just gotta need to get into the trading mode and play conversion. One funny thing that I actually came across recently. Okay, this is quite funny in itself, but I started playing Euro Truck Simulator. So if you don't know the game, you're pretty much a truck driver. Which in itself is pretty easy, but the most tricky part is when you get to the destination. You get to the destination, you need to detach the trailer. So the problem is that you need to be very precise, and it's very difficult to detach the trailer of a truck in case you never did it, even in game. So it gives you two options. One that's more rewarding, which is put the trailer wherever the customer wants, or keep it simple. Play it safe. Just don't worry about it. You get less money, but you just get rid of it. In chess, there is no such additional reward of winning in style or winning faster. Everything pays you the same. It's 1 point, you get a win. The win doesn't have a smell, or how do they say it? So you just need to keep it simple. Don't worry about detaching the damn trailer. So queen c6 offering queen trade. Whenever you have extra pawn, you should be spamming your opponent with a queen trade. So I'm just doing that. I'm ready to castle next. I'm gonna play rook c8 onto the next move. And okay, queen g4. Queen g4, attacking a pawn that's protected. Not afraid of that. I'm gonna take another free pawn because it's free and it's kind of screaming at us to be captured. I'm not afraid of the check because I block, and I'm ready to castle next. You could have castled if you're generally, whenever you have already an extra pawn, it's much better to ignore additional extra material if you feel like it's getting risky for your pieces. Remember that, very important tip. Before, what do I do with my queen? Let's see if you guys can find the best move considering the advice I just gave you a second ago. And it's the most powerful thing really that you can do. Extra pawn, spam with a queen trade. I can do this. But even that is better because I don't think it gives him much of a choice. I'm attacking the rook. So spam the queen trade. You can can offer a queen trade. It's generally they will try to avoid. But whenever they avoid, they're losing a lot of squares on the chessboard. And if they trade, well, I got some pretty good news for you. You're probably not going to get mated without the queens on the board. Or at least let me believe that. So, queen d4 just not giving him much of a choice. We're keeping it simple. Got my queen trade, got the 2 extra pawns. Now, I can go ahead and take the third one. But then my knight is a little bit far away from home. The king will attack. It could get somewhat tricky, let's say. So I already have 2 extra pawns. I start to prioritize safety a bit more. I just play knight f5. It's not that he was necessarily threatening to take my pawn since there was a pin, but it's a nice idea in general to play safe. And now we just need to watch out for his threats. He wants to infiltrate. I have one way to stop that. King d8 or king d7. Which one do I choose? King d7 because it's connecting the rooks. So rooks are connected. Next idea, we're just going to be placing rooks on the pretty much only open file on the board. So my next moves are very forced. You don't even have to think of them. I play rook c8, I trade the rook, I put the other one on c8. We just play conversion game. It's very simple. You don't need to be a master at the end game. Maybe this could be some of your concern. Right, you play like this, you know all the end games, you are an end game genius. You afford to do it, surely. No, you can be a total endgame bastard and it's gonna work the same. And I'm telling you from experience. As long as you have an extra pawn, you need to get into king and pawn endgame. Even you don't really need perfect technique. 99% of the endgames are gonna be winning. And it's very intuitive. You just have to push the pawn most of the times. So, in this situation, we still have knight against bishop. So notice that I'm either forcing trade, or if he avoids the trade, I win the full file, which I can use to infiltrate and further activate. So he doesn't really have a choice. This is what makes this strategy so effective. Now we got almost king and pawn endgame. I have passed pawns. I just need to push them. I don't need to be an endgame wizard. Of course, I would love to be one, but I probably wouldn't be making YouTube in that case. So I'm just gonna bring my king. You wanna bring your king in the end games? I see potentially annoying check. I start with f6. Pawn protected by pawn, completely blunts the enemy bishop. Also supporting this future e5 push. So king d6, king e2, just push my pawns. I have 1 minute left on the clock, but my moves are pretty easy. And we're gonna have a bit of a last technical trick to watch out for while pushing these pawns. Because there is a bit of a risk of getting stuck with the pawns. So you wanna be pushing pawns and in some way control the squares around it. If you have a bishop, you normally push pawns on opposite color of the bishop. So let's say I had light square bishop instead of the knight, push pawns on opposite color of the bishop. Now the knight can change color, so it doesn't matter that much. But see, he's already trying to set up a blockade, which is interesting. I'll just have to try to get a knight fighting for those squares, and the knight can do that from f4. I'm attacking. He has to go back. I can even just push pawns. I can even use king to take more of his pawns. Let's do e4. I guess it's easiest to centralize my king. And I'm not gonna be able to queen just because his king is gonna be Caro-Kann and stay in front of the pawn. But I'm gonna create another passed pawn because that is the luxury of having 2 extra pawns. Okay, let's put pawns on the light squares. Just making sure his bishop never attacks my pawns. His bishop is gonna be useless in any counterplay scenario. And I'm just gonna get the other passer. As a rule of thumb, you want to push the, I wanted to say, the pawn that's passed. So the g pawn in this case. Now I can push g5 without losing the pawn. I'll centralize. I'm just chasing a bishop trade. It's even more effective. Now bishop is restricted. I don't mind the trade. This is the ideal scenario. So you have extra pawn, and as I was saying, you don't need to have some genius technique. It would of course help to have more than 10 seconds on your clock, but should be rather manageable. So just promote one of the pawns and then you checkmate. Okay, you wanna do it? Let's do it with the rook. Let's do it for you guys with the rook. Let's show the technique. So I'm gonna start to chase him, and then we'll have to play a waiting move. Okay, get rook onto the other side, and I will be waiting for the kings to face each other. And you get a checkmate. Now, having he gone to the other side, you just chase him, and it's gonna be zugzwang. Has to come here, and then you mate. So this is how you're gonna be doing it most of your games. You just need to win a pawn, annoy the life out of your opponent with the trades, until he's gonna be left with a king alone and one pawn less. It just really cannot hurt you. So, okay. Hope you guys like this game. Thematic strategy in advanced variation. Pawn on d4 is the target. The target moved because of knight c5. We were able to remove defender of e5 pawn, and by using basic tactic, getting rid of the defender, we were able to collect and convert. Don't forget about the convert part. So remember to start using the queen trade, and with that being said, I think we can move on to the following game. Dear chess improvers, welcome back. Okay, opponent plays e4, getting ourselves another game on e4. So king's pawn in the center. We're gonna be Caro-Kanning. So we start with a pawn, getting ready to push d5 so we can recapture back with a pawn. That is pretty much the core idea of the Caro-Kann. However, another core idea of the Caro-Kann is that this goofy shenanigans never works, which is another part. Little bit of the many reasons of why Caro-Kann is the queen of beginner openings. You just don't have to worry about it. Bishop is misplaced. It gets hit in the face with our d5 move. Now, my opponent is checking me. And before we continue with that, I'm just gonna give you a little bit of context for how you want to view these sidelines. Because even if they don't play the theoretical moves, you can still be in familiar territory. So normally, let's say after d4, d5, white can either protect the pawn, push, or take on d5. So the key moves will be, let's say after knight c3, take, you play knight f6. And after knight f6, you get those double pawns, and this is a thematic structure. Another thematic structure is after ed, cd, exchange variation. So when ed happens, it's exchange. Now, if they ever push pawn to e5, that's advanced variation. So kind of like no matter what move orders they're choosing, even like this, now because he took, it's exchange variation. We're gonna apply the same plans. On the check, I'm offering bishop trade. I could also block with the knight, but I don't want to pin myself if I can just exchange them. And I'm going to recapture with the knight, developing a piece. And we are going to be keeping the same mindset from the exchange variation, which is we're never playing for an attack against the king unless he goes long castle. But if he castles short, we don't really care about his king. It's all gonna be about playing on this side into the middle game. So for now, we're just gonna do standard development. So get our bishop out, and then we see. Expecting him to castle. By the way, he played it, and okay, we are gonna get an interesting position because we have a choice for the dark squared bishop. We can choose between d6, e7. So normally, I recommend to put the bishop on e7 always, just to never have to worry about the bishop g5 pin. Now, there is a bit of a particular detail in the position which you can try to pause the video and think about why, compared to most of the times, bishop g5 isn't so annoying anymore. The idea is that normally in the Caro-Kann, the knight will be on c6. But because he checked me, now it ended up being on d7, from where it's defending the other knight, and in case of a bishop g5 move, I can always move the queen unpinning without having to worry about potentially getting double pawns. That's never gonna be a worry because the knight just backs it up. So bishop g5 is there. I can safely move the queen if I want to. Let's start with h6 though, just to see what the bishop wants to do, decides to take. If he was going back, I wanted to castle and continue with similar play as we will see. And I can take both with the queen or with the knight. I will try to avoid as much as possible to get the double pawns around the king. Now, taking with the pawn is not going to give you a losing position, but it's already the sign that things can potentially go wrong in the future much easier. So avoid pawns, double pawns around your king. Those are the most dangerous double pawns. Other than that, double pawns can be pretty useful in chess. Keep that in mind. I think I'm just gonna take with a knight. The queen normally belongs on c7 in this exchange variation of the Caro-Kann. So important to remember it as in the exchange variation. Whenever I give advice, pay attention to the mental anchors that I use. So I mention this idea in this variation. Because a common mistake, people just put all the ideas in same Caro-Kann bucket. And this way, you're not going to get the information to be precise enough. So you will hear me often say this idea in this or that variation, or say in general. So if I say in general, it probably means you can apply that idea with both colors. So, okay. Now that you have a little bit of a, how do you say, an agenda? Not an agenda. Now that you know how to store the information, we can move on. So, 92 by my opponent, castling, and we get to the good stuff. We get to the middle game. I'm gonna start with, I was about to say an important move, rook c8. We have to play with the open file. Why is the file open is because we don't have a black pawn on it. So we can just put the rook there and instantly it would be fighting for a lot of squares. I can even barely count them. So rook c8 would be a good move, but notice that opponent puts knight in the middle. So normally whenever your opponent is putting a piece in our half of the board, we try to remove it immediately. So even though bishops are slightly more valuable pieces than knights, I think it's a good trade just to get rid of a very active knight. So we're gonna eliminate the knight, and then the knight, where does it go? I'm just gonna play d7 with tempo on the pawn. I'm not putting it on e8, blocking the connection between rooks. I'm not gonna put it on h7 because it has no future. So knight d7, potentially in the future rerouting to c5. Okay, we see knight f3. protecting the pawn. Very normal stuff so far. I think I'm gonna start with rook c8, putting rook on the open file. And remember what I told you in the beginning. Caro-Kann, exchange variation. What makes it exchange variation? Even though it started with this goofy Lowello stuff, he took. So when he takes, it's exchange variation, and we're gonna play in that rectangle. We say no to checkmate. We just don't care about the enemy king at all. We just want to win on that side of the board. So we need to do minority attack. Why? Notice there is on the open file, there is a crystal, pawn protecting pawn, which is making my rook, the rook is decently placed, but it doesn't have any realistic pressure. The rook will never have a threat to take. So we need to try to break that crystal. Play b4, undermine the pawn. And I want to create a pawn that's not protected by a pawn. That is going to be way more vulnerable. Rook e1. Now queen b6. Developing the queen is fine. I mentioned in the beginning queen c7 is okay, but I just want to put it on b6 here to support b4. I think it can be even more helpful. And expecting move like maybe even queen d4 or queen somewhere. Opponent is playing very decent for his elo, I have to say. Makes common sense moves all the time. But I think we can already start to knock at his door. We have this b4, so we undermine the pawn crystal to open up rook's path. And after queen to b3, he is defending, but I can actually take. And notice that, okay, he goes for this trade, which is losing a pawn. But just to kind of give you a feeling for how vulnerable the pawn on c3 is, I don't even have to take it immediately. You should take is the best move. But just to highlight what was the goal of our whole plan, we wanted to create an isolated pawn. And then when the pawn is isolated, we can double up rooks, and then it's much easier to attack it. Opponent can try to hang on, but yet again, just like too many ways to attack it. So I think knight a4 just collects it. Rook c4, interesting move as well with d4 idea, because if knight capture, rook captures, then rook is hanging. But knight a4, simple move, collecting the pawn. So you see how everything, as I said in the beginning, it's happening in this rectangle because we have the open file that gives us pressure. So don't care about the enemy king. Okay, we play Caro-Kann. We do the Caro-Kann mate only in the Tartakova. That's the only variation when we do it. In the one with double pawns there. And knight d2 now, simple rule in general for the conversion, we try to exchange all the pieces, as many pieces as possible. So I can take knight, but that's not prioritizing a trade. I will take with rooks, just offering him to exchange everything. He should keep pieces, by the way, like maybe rook b1, but this kind of players normally underestimate this idea. And I think I can already bring my king. Let's just bring the king. Can also play f6 to break in the center, but yeah, let's actually speed up because I don't have that much time left on the clock. Would be a pity to miss this game. That's the problem. Caro-Kann goes to the endgame. It's an easily winning endgame. It's just that with the explanation, I don't have a lot of time remaining, but that sounds like an excuse. You didn't come here to listen to excuse, did you? I'm pretty sure that's not why you came here. And okay, he plays king d2. So I was about to activate my king perhaps and either win the pawn or go to that side and win another one. But king d2 allows me to pick up a3 pawn with a fork. So I have two extra pawns. And now it's going to be time to perhaps maybe collect another one if he blunders. Knight e3 stuff he has to watch out for. Okay, take on e5, another free pawn. Move my king. We'll have to stay away from the checks. I have an outside passed pawn that I can use as a bait. Yet again, I would be in love with a knight trade. If we could get a knight trade, that would make his slightest chance of counterplay disappear. But for now, we should be able to. Oh, I told you. Knight trade. He listened. What a kind opponent. He gave knight trade. Now the king and pawn endgame. This is how you want to win most of your games in chess. Just trade all the pieces, extra at least one pawn in the king and pawn endgame, and then it's easily gonna win itself. You don't really need to have good technique. Okay, you can just start chopping all the pawns if that makes it easier for you. Just remove any chance of screwing it up. Then just make sure to not stalemate. Okay, I'm taking his pawns and I'm just gonna promote. Okay, so get the queen and I will get the second queen as well, just to do the Moan Loner. The Lone Moaner. That is what it's actually called. That name of a checkmate always confuses me. So I'm getting my second queen. I don't care about what he does. And I will try to put him in a box. So just to showcase, I will play queen d6, set up the box, and then I will be using the other queen to shorten the box. So now he's in the box, and I'm gonna cut the box with one file. Look how the box is getting shorter. And now the box is only made of like 2 ranks, and we made him with check. So yeah, hell yeah, that went actually pretty smoothly. This is how you get your pieces developed in exchange variation, as I said, with the risk of sounding like a broken record. And then you go for minority attack. This is the move that pretty much nobody really considers below 1500. I would say even above that. But this move just goes unnoticed. You want to target these pawns, and just to show a bit of an idea, if he was taking and then let's say playing b3, well, this is an interesting position because you already have an asset in the endgames. You have a protected passed pawn. So if you do like an exercise and exchange all the pieces from the board, the endgames are quite dangerous for white with such a pawn in the king and pawn endgame. But I would have done same strategy. a5, a4 was my plan. So let's say he makes some kind of a move. a4 takes, and then either trade rooks, pick up that, or rook a8, knight c5, something to win back the pawn. And the idea is how this is happening. Let's say it's very common you'll get a situation like this where slowly but surely you are gonna be winning the a pawn. And you're gonna have these endgames with extra pawn, 5 against 4, with potentially vulnerable pawn on e5, which should be winning in the long run. But it's very easy to play. You just need to play ping pong with your opponent. Just get the ball over the net. He's down a pawn, miserable. You can just always trade, and the endgames are snowballing in your favor slowly. So, yeah. Okay. This is how you deal with the exchange variation, and more specifically, your favorite variation, the hillbilly attack. So, hey, thanks for making it all the way into this video. I love you like salt from food. You may or may not use this pickup line at your own risk, though. Jokes aside, you're really awesome. That's not a joke. Jokes aside, apart from that, I have 2 quick announcements that I wanted to make. First of all, my Caro-Kann book is on a sale in the next week, depending on whenever you watch this. There's probably not gonna be a sale in like the next 2 months in case they keep the same schedule like last year. So perhaps this is a good time to get it if you were waiting. And second of all, I'm looking for a book editor. I am planning to also publish a book on Amazon in the future. And I need somebody that is able to take a chess position like this, because all my notes are written like that using a chessboard, and pretty much put them into a book. And I also need the book editor to know chess. Kind of, at least. Ideally at about 1000 elo. But to at least understand what chess is about and how chess works to be able to give a little bit of feedback. This is a very serious offer. So reach out to me. Reach out via email. I'm actually gonna put my email in the comments or something like that. So thanks again, everybody, for making it all the way this far in the video. And I'll see you in the next speedrun episode. Have a good one.